Hi, this is John Rowell for the Rowell Report. Today is Tuesday, November 4th, 2025, and as you may have heard in my previous video, I am traveling this week. Anyway, the report will be short and to the point. And tomorrow the report will also probably be about the same. So I will leave a link below to a video from France 24, which I'm commenting on today. So anyway, you're welcome to watch that report, quote unquote, report from France 24 on Ukraine, the front lines. And so it's a shameless exposition of wartime propaganda that is being pumped out by France 24. And obviously, there's going to be narrative controls within Ukraine for information that flows out from the country. The two individuals being interviewed both are in Ukraine. So if they were to put out a narrative with which the Ukraine FSB, their KGB, is not an agreement with, the reporters could be removed and even imprisoned. So you can see that many people in Ukraine who are answering questions are walking on very thin ice if they begin to go in the areas where they could get themselves into trouble. And this is the real problem with wartime reporting, and that is that both sides want to put out a narrative. The Ukrainian narrative, especially in the area of Pokrovsk, is that everything is fine. Ukraine is in control of both Pokrovsk and Mirnograd. So, anyway, but if you go to others, like the mapping, the more neutral mappers, there are some more neutral pro-Ukrainian mappers, and there's more neutral pro-Russian mappers, and then there's just neutral mappers. On the end of the most extreme pro-Ukrainian mappers, we have Deep State, which in the month of October had Russia gaining 250 square kilometers, while other pro-Ukrainian, more neutral mappers had them gaining about 650 square kilometers. Some have put it almost close to 700 square kilometers. So there are narrative battles. Deep State is basically the outlet of the um, of Siersky and Budanov and these individuals. So you can see before they are, they have to. There's one pro-Ukrainian mapper who's more neutral, and he's not in Ukraine, so he's a little bit more, more able to put out more accurate reports. So all the more neutral mappers have Russia practically taking the whole of Pokrovsk, while the city of Mirnograd, most of the city of Mirnograd, is under complete Ukrainian control. So this seems to be the most accurate assessment. Also, the most neutral mappers have a gray zone of about 1.2 kilometers from which supplies and soldiers can enter this space, or soldiers could exit. So that is not a very large space, and that space is being completely controlled by the Russian drone teams. So really, nothing gets in, nothing gets out. So basically, Mirnograd is right now um, is in is encircled, so not completely encircled by Russian forces, but basically nothing can come in, nothing can go out. So they are basically encircled, and now it's just the task of the Russian forces to locate the Ukrainian troops within Mirnograd and destroy their positions, force them to come out into the open, and then try to get them with the drones. Also, there are uh, Ukrainian soldiers who are surrendering. So, anyway, so basically, the situation in Pokrovsk is that Pokrovsk is not 100% under Russian control, but just about. And in Mirnograd, it's almost 100% Ukrainian control, maybe 90%. So the Russians are, and of course, there's a delay of information coming out of this area. Of course, the Russians aren't going to be saying, we're moving here, we're moving there. We'll only know that after they have taken an area, or after they've attempted to take an area, and then the Ukrainians were able to repulse that movement, and then they publish that information. So all that information comes out in a bit of a delay, and of course, if the Russians find all the Starlink um, satellite internet uh, equipment and destroy them, then Ukraine really has no way of communicating out of Mirnograd, and then it's just Russia that's communicating. So there could be a lot more information coming from the Russian side than the Ukrainian side. But the main point is that there's a reality on the ground, which is Pokrovsk, and Mirnograd right now is divided between Russian and Ukrainian forces. So the um, the report coming out from France 24 is that Russian soldiers were seen in Pokrovsk, and we don't know anything else. So basically, the narrative coming out of Kiev is that Russians have shown up in Pokrovsk, but those commenting on this offensive by the Russians can say that the Russians are winning the city or are in control of Pokrovsk, because that would go against the official narrative of President Zelensky and Syrskyi, that have said that everything is fine. The Russians are making incursions, but they're being pushed back. So anyway, that is the first point. And if you watch this video from France 24, you get the idea that they know that they are treading on very thin ice. So they're um, encircling the issue without actually addressing it. And this is also a Western control over the narratives that have come out of this war from the beginning. So anyway, the same thing happened in Bakhmut. The same thing happened in Avdiivka, in Chasiv Yar. In Chasiv Yar, according to Deep State, the Ukrainians still are in Chasiv Yar. They still have a control over part of Chasiv Yar. So, anyway, these old narratives die slowly, and at some point they'll update their map, but they won't say, hey, we were wrong, or we waited, or we knew that the information was wrong. Because this is all, internal narrative control for the Ukrainian people. And so the Ukrainian people, to continue to support this war effort, have to think that Ukraine has a chance, that they're keeping the Russians at bay, and that you know, we go back to this whole narrative about the unkillable Ukrainian soldier and about Ukrainians being, you know, more intelligent than the Russians, better soldiers. Um, so, anyway, this is the first point is that there is a reality on the ground. Mirnograd is mostly controlled by Ukraine, but Russia is attacking from various sides, as well as using artillery, using uh, various type of, you know, air to surface bombs, you know, from you know, fab bombs and other kind of bombs. So anyway, uh, the Ukrainians are defending themselves, but you know, basically they're encircled, and if they don't give up, they will be destroyed. A few can attempt to escape through that 1.2 kilometer corridor, which is open right now. Many times, uh, the in warfare psychology, you leave a gap open from which people can escape. Because as long as people have the idea that they can escape if they need to, then they're more they're they're more focused on thinking that they have another day or another week, another month, and don't realize that, you know, the lock um, has, you know, the door has been closed and locked, and there's no way out. When you close off completely, then they go into panic mode, and then there can be higher casualties on the side which is encircling them. So basically, um, the narrative coming from Kiev is that everything is fine. Pokrovsk and Mirnograd are completely under Ukrainian control, and Russians are present, but they're being pushed out. The news media like France 24, its goal is to not necessarily support this narrative, but not to present information contrary to that narrative. So, and then we have the more neutral information sources, some of which are not in Ukraine and not under control of the FSB, and they're putting out information that's very clear. Pokrovsk basically is now under full Russian control, except for a couple of areas, small areas, and Mirnograd is partially um, under Russian control, but mostly the Ukrainian soldiers, maybe 4,000, 3,500, are entrenched, probably in more fortified areas, so they'll be harder to root out of that. This will take a while. Um, then the next thing is that they mentioned in this report about the permission that Zelensky gave for 18 to 23-year-olds to leave the country if they wanted to. So anyway, the expert, the so-called expert that they brought on, stated that this is the most militarily capable age group, 18 to 23. Well, the United States started to delve into that age group during the Vietnam War, and that was a very bad mistake. In World War II, the average age of the soldiers was um, higher than that. So when you get into the 18 to 23-year-old, they're very idealistic, and they can be whipped up with a lot of enthusiasm, but they don't have a lot of combat readiness. And this individual said that the 18 to 23-year-old range is the most combat ready group. Well, I think history tends to disagree with that narrative. So he said, this expert said, why did Zelensky allow this group to leave when they're the most combat ready group? Of course, where do you get that information from? We know from Vietnam, recruiting in that 18 to 23-year-old range was a huge mistake. So, um, and then he said that Zelensky is interested in running for office. Um, so apparently, somebody gave this individual the ability to criticize Zelensky for allowing this age group to leave the country. So, anyway, you can see that there starts to be some confusion in the narrative regarding the recruiting of those individuals, which up until now these were basically supposedly untouchable. We could look at the real evidence if they're actually being mobilized or not, just snatched off the street, given a gun, and sent to the front line. But anyway, I think the second point is that we're starting to see this narrative come out where Ukraine is going to have to start digging into these age groups, the 18 to 23-year-old. It's funny that they don't mention about recruiting soldiers from Kiev, where all the oligarchs, the wealthiest people of Ukraine, are in their palaces and fancy apartments, and basically under the protection of the most advanced air defense systems. So, why doesn't this individual say, well, just go into this area? You have plenty of people who are in their late 20s, 30s, 40s, and they could be recruited. But no, he focuses on the 18 to 23-year-olds who, basically, if they start to recruit them, they will be ruining their future if this war lasts a few more years and most of those who are recruited die. So, these are people who are still in Ukraine, who could be a part of their future. So, why would you want to involve them in a failed military effort? So, that was another. The second point is that the 18 to 23-year-old is not combat ready. They are their brains are still developing, so to speak. These aren't the right people to put on the front line. And you can see also the NATO narrative, um, I think, coming out of the U.S. State Department and the Pentagon is that Ukraine needs to dig into every population group, even women, in order to fill the ranks of their military until they basically drain their country of every available individual who could go to the front line. That would be a huge mistake, really. So, and the third point about this video that I watched is that it mentions about the Russian attacks on civilian infrastructure. Well, Russia has been going after the electrical substations, electrical uh, generation, because that is what is being used for their military industrial complex factories, and to move their trains. Their trains transport soldiers, equipment, um, shells, bullets, military advisors, foreign mercenaries. So Russia is going after all that infrastructure that supports their military effort. So there always will be a consequence for the civilian population, but this isn't exclusively civilian infrastructure. So it is a half truth to say that Russians are focusing on destroying civilian infrastructure when this is the infrastructure that they're using to support their military effort. And if you can imagine people going on trains, who is really going on trains these days in Ukraine? They're going to be tourists who can come in and they can put out the narrative from Kiev, which their golden city, to tell everyone that everything is okay and the capital of freedom and democracy. So they want plenty of tourists to come in to pump out all these false narratives. Also, they need this infrastructure um, really to support their military effort. If you can think that they're mobilizing people who are in their 30s and 40s, do you think someone who's in their 30s and 40s, a man, is going to go just take a train ride? They're going to have recruiters at every station, at every stop. As soon as someone gets out who's available age, who could be mobilized, they may be mobilized. So why would they get on a train where they're basically at the whim of the Ukrainian military recruiters? And also, if we go on to the next point, is that um, France 24 mentioned about war crimes committed by Russians against the civilian population in Pokrovsk. Well, you have to think that these are ethnic Russian cities, or primarily ethnic Russian cities. They're continuing this effort to liberate the ethnic Russian population from the Ukrainian tyranny, which was unleashed against them, against their culture, against their language, against their religion. So, why are they going to go into cities and start massacring civilians, which they are trying to liberate? So, that doesn't make any sense. We know in the past that there's been efforts made to concoct massacres or war crimes against civilians by Russians, and none of this was backed up by anything more than doctored evidence. So this is a, they don't actually provide any um, evidence of that claim. They just make the claim as if it's just normal, and it's, they just mention it in passing. So um, this war now is entering, I would say, the last phase of this. Oh, another point of this video is that they mentioned that if Rakos falls, it's an important city, but it's not going to tell the whole story, and it won't, the the war between Ukraine and Russia won't be told mentioning Pokrovsk. It's just kind of an important city, just like a whole bunch of other important cities. It's a important hub, but not a key city. You can see as soon as Ukraine begins to lose in an area, how they knock down a city from one level lower and lower and lower. Like Bugledar was a key city. It was a fortified city full of these Soviet-built high-rises, which are, which basically are undestroyable unless they're hit with a good number of Fab 500 or 3000s, which are huge bombs. So they were keeping the Russians from advancing further, and so it was a key Ukrainian fortified city until it fell, and then it was just it was not really that important. Really, it just one city among many other cities. So, but Zelensky told the soldiers that they had to stay there or die trying to defend the city. So why was it a key city and had to be defended to the death? And then as soon as it fell, it was completely unimportant. It was just another city among others. So you can see that France 24 is participating in this whole narrative control as they move viewers towards the idea that if Pokrovsk and Mirnograd were to fall, then no big deal. Ukraine can set up defenses elsewhere. And the truth is that Pokrovsk is a key hub that was providing the military, supplies and communications for most of the important areas in the Donbass. So if Pokrovsk and Mirnograd were to fall, then it's basically a doorway into Kramatorsk and Konstantinovka. And the other door that goes into this area is Izium. So you got on one side, you got Pokrovsk, Mirnograd, and the other side, you got Izium. So Russia will open the door from one side, and then will open the door from the other side. So they're nowhere near Izium. So there will be a time lag between when Pokrovsk Mirnograd falls and when Kramatorsk Konstantinovka falls. So people will say, you see, Pokrovsk really wasn't that important to that whole area. It was this other city, or there was this other, territory. So, but anyway, Russia needs to open the two doorways to get in to Kramatorsk, and once they get into this key area of the Donbass, basically the Russians will have 90% of what they wanted territorially to protect the ethnic Russian population. Of course, now they're talking about Novorossiya, which are 8 oblasts plus Crimea. So Russia will continue on to try to liberate all 8 oblasts, including Odessa and Zaporizhia. You see that Russia is making good progress towards Zaporizhia, and so there is advances and then they pull back, and then advances and they pull back. When they pull back and the Ukrainians advance, then they hit the Ukrainians with everything they have, and then when those forces are neutralized, then they'll advance again, and this time advance even further. So, but right now we see that we're getting ready for winter. So what Russia wants to do is to get into a good position for their spring offensive. So anyway, but going back to the point of this video is that whenever you watch a video which comes from some Western source which tells you that they're neutral and they're just providing you with the most accurate information they have, just remember that they can't be in Ukraine without being a part of the FSB information control. And if you think even further back, in 2014, the CIA took over the Ukrainian FSB. So basically, all the narratives are being controlled from Washington by the permanent state, deep state, whatever you want to call it. And you say, well, President Trump, he's not controlling that, so it's not coming from Washington. Well, President Trump is one interchangeable piece in a in a larger construction. So the presidents come and go, but the permanent state is basically the foundation and the walls, and then the furniture is like the presidents and the vice president and the Congress, and all these people are inside a building which is controlling everything inside. So President Trump really has to go along with all this narrative creation, which it comes out of the permanent state, the CIA, the think tanks, the Pentagon, those in the Pentagon who need to uh, control the narrative. So, and the president can't really go against them. Some even refer to John F. Kennedy as having been removed because he was not going along um, with this whole narrative control. Okay, so I don't have any proof of that, but some um, who are studious and our authorities do mention that as what they think is the real reason why JFK was shot. So um, the presidents know that they come and go, but what stays the same is basically that underlying structure to U.S. foreign policy and what the U.S. is doing in different parts of the world. So, um, the CIA took over the Ukrainian FSB after the Maidan coup, and this narrative control, which is taking place, uses very advanced software. You can think this software is also used in Israel so that people within Israel can't just put out information that's not approved, that has to go first through a censor. So that's, like the reporters and newspapers. There's going to be a similar system in Ukraine. And so those who are in Ukraine reporting are mindful that their reporting could be shut down at any time if they were to give a contrary narrative. See, whenever you see them interviewing people in Ukraine, you know that their hands are tied and they're just going to go along with the narrative, and that's how they keep their job, and that's how they keep their position within Ukraine. So anyway, that is my report for today. And if you like this video, please hit the like button, subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you another video. I'll leave the link below to the um, France 24 video that has this shameless propaganda pumped out. Um, Listen to every word and how they're trying to walk a tightrope on trying to present information as if they're being accurate, and trying to give uh, the narrative of what's going on. At the same time, they're having to stay within this larger framework of Zelensky saying everything's okay in Pokrovsk and Mirnograd. So um, when you watch those news sources, whether it's France 24, Deutsche Welle, um, I could go through the list, BBC, The Telegraph, I think it's Times Radio, all these news sources, they're just part of this larger information control. So you need to dig around a little bit to look for accurate information which is not being controlled by one narrative or another, and then make your own decision. So I would encourage you to do that. Anyway, thanks again for joining me, and I wish you a good day. Bye bye.